A good afternoon to you all and a very warm welcome to all members of the Radley community and also to any of our school partners who've joined us today on Zoom. My name's Caroline Monaghan and I'm responsible for our new Beyond Radley speaker programme, a series of talks designed to give you an insight into the world of work. This is the third of our talks this week. We've already had speakers on the career pathway into law and working for a global brand. If you're interested in watching any of these videos, they're on our website. Over the coming weeks, we'll continue to bring you a variety of speakers from the Radley Network to help you understand the types of careers available to you and what you need to get into them. So if there are any specific careers that you want to hear about, then please do email me directly. We'll also bring in speaker experts who will talk to you about broader concepts like entrepreneurism and the transferable business skills that you'll need to develop to move between jobs and careers in the future. We'll run 3 Beyond Radley careers events a week for the next few weeks, and then it's likely the programme will continue longer term as part of our careers offering. Now, I'm shortly going to hand you over to our guest speaker, Jamie Campbell, but before I do that, just a couple of housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute throughout. If you wish to ask a question during the talk, then please put it on the chat and I'll direct it to Jamie at the appropriate time. There'll also be a Q&A session at the end and you can ask questions then via the chat. I need to let you know that the event will be recorded. This is so that we can share it with those who are unable to attend today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Old Radleyan Jamie Campbell, acclaimed director and producer, who most recently produced the series Sex Education for Netflix and, rather excitingly, is currently filming the 3rd series. He's going to talk to you about his career in the TV industry, what TV production is like in the current climate, and what to think about if you want to pursue a career in it. I'm going to hand you over to Jamie. Thank you, Jamie.
Hello, everyone. I can see some of you, which is very nice. And I can see some very famous Radley names up there. So I can't see all of you at the moment, but it's great to see some extraordinarily some teachers, some dons that were there in my time. Hello, Mr. Horsey. Hello, Mr. Rathbone. I can see you as well. And it's lovely of you all just to come along and have a listen while I take you through a little bit of what I've been up to since leaving. I'll tell you how I'm going to structure this. So probably until around 4:30, I'll just tell you a little bit about my time at school. Then what I did immediately afterwards, I'll show some clips of, actually I'm going to show a clip of something that I did at Radley, just for old time's sake. And which still exists, amazingly, in Mr. Horsey's archive. Then I'm going to show you some clips from early in my career before I set up the company, and then a few clips of shows that we've been doing at 11 since we set the company up. As Caroline says, there will be some questions at the end, but please just feel free, if you want to interrupt me at any point, send a question through to Caroline and she can stop me, and I'm really happy to take questions at any point. So I went to Radley in 1990. I'd been at a prep school, which I think still exists, called Brockhurst. And I was in A-Social, firstly with Peter Johnson, and then latterly with Mr. Nye, who I think may just have left Radley, so some of you may know him. And when I was at Radley, I really loved writing and acting and directing, and I had done a little bit of that at Brockhurst, but there was very early on just a very sort of clear opportunity to get stuck into all of those things. I think there was something called the Haddon Cup. Does the Haddon Cup still? There are some people nodding, yeah. And I remember doing a sort of condensed version of Hamlet in my first year in the Haddon Cup, which was great fun, and really just loved the process of devising something, working out how you're going to perform it, learning the lines, getting together with lots of people and coming up with a production that would then hopefully entertain people. And, you know, on those rare occasions might even say something about the world as well. And I thought that was just a kind of magical process. So I got really involved with theatre when I was at school. I did 2 or 3 school plays. In my 5th form, I co-wrote a play called Circus with a very brilliant guy in the year above me called Will Mufti, and that was about bullying at boarding schools, and we put that on at Radley, and then we went to the Edinburgh Festival as well, and that did quite well at the Edinburgh Festival. And so I got really encouraged by just that, the process of devising something, coming up with an idea, putting it on paper, and then putting it into production could be a very fulfilling process, and also that you get a really interesting reaction from your audience, and just so I got intrigued by that. And there was then a sort of fateful moment where one of my best friends was called Tom Crowther at school, and another good friend called Rick Barker, who is the son of an ex-tutor, Charlie Barker, who used to be tutor of 8 Social. And we came up with an idea which was more of a sort of film script, and I think it sort of ran to 90 minutes in the early scripts, which was obviously incredibly arrogant and way too long. But we thought this could be fun if we could find a way to film this, that it could be quite rewarding. And we had a fateful meeting with Mr. Halsey, who I don't think I was ever taught by specifically, but he had this sort of extraordinary goldmine of production equipment locked away in this I think next to his classroom there was a sort of annex and all this incredible equipment that me and Rick and Tom, Mr. Halsey let us sort of look at it, experiment with it, and we thought this could be an incredible way for us to make our first movie. And there was, I think, an early JVC camera which filmed quite high quality at that time. So this was 1993 at this point. And then some great editing equipment as well. And so we went ahead and we had our script. We thought, no point in getting other people other than ourselves to act in it. So we were in it as well. We filmed it ourselves, edited it ourselves, and then we showed it a couple of times at Radley. And I thought it might be just quite nice to to show you a minute from that. You may recognise the location, and the main person in this clip is as I said, my friend Tom Crowther. And then at the end of the clip, you will see a much younger version of me. I hope this doesn't scare people too much. The title of this film was Genesis 96. And we'll get to it now. Hold on. 1 second. Here we go. So, well, covered passage hasn't changed that much. So that was we made that in 1993. We had a lot of fun doing that, and we actually made a couple of other films while we were still at Radley. Again, using the amazing equipment that Max was able to lend to us, and so I really sort of got the bug for both acting and directing and producing whilst I was at school. And I decided to do English at university with the ambition, I suppose, of becoming a director. And I went to Durham, was there for 3 years, was very involved with the theatre there. I ran the Durham Review, which is a sort of sketch comedy group at that university. And when I came out of Durham, I decided to go to film school, and there are a couple of really great film schools in the UK, one of which is the National Film School, And then there's another one called the London Film School, which is the one that I went to in Covent Garden. And it's a 3-year course, and it introduces you to basically all aspects of filmmaking, including editing and directing and producing and set design, script writing. So it's a sort of generalist course, which was exactly what I wanted. And I had a really lucky break after the first year of being there, which was then, so that's coming into 2001, because an idea that I developed with a friend of mine from university, we had decided to go and to film it on a sort of shoestring in New York with quite a small video camera that we had bought from Dixon's, which I think is no longer in existence as an electrical store. So sorry for that sort of archaic reference. But we bought, I think, a £150 digital camera from Dixon's, probably a worse camera than the one that we were using with Mr. Horsey at Radley. And we went off to New York and filmed this thing that we thought was going to be a sort of 90-minute comedy feature film. We'd scripted it ourselves, we were in it ourselves, and we edited it ourselves and did all the different roles in it ourselves. And we sent it to someone that knew someone at Channel 4. And amazingly, we got a reply from that person who'd watched it and said, well, this is not either a comedy or a feature film, but it could be a half-hour documentary if you go and film the sort of second half of it. So they gave us enough money to go back to New York to film it. And then we were very, very lucky because it was the first thing that we did, and it was broadcast on Channel 4 as a documentary in the year 2001. And I'm very, very aware that that is a year before many of the people on this call were actually born. But it was a time in sort of documentary making in this country which was very exciting, because there was a lot of authored feature documentaries being made, and you could still get stuff commissioned in all of the main channels, where you could basically experiment, or you could come up with a very strong thesis for a documentary, and you could make a single film exploring that idea. So we made, in those early days, we made films about trying to track down Osama bin Laden. When the FBI was offering $27 million for his arrest, we thought, we'd try and find information that could lead to his arrest. And we did a sort of satirical hour-long piece for Channel 4, focusing on that. Did an hour-long show for BBC Two, focusing on someone called Martha Stewart, who was a sort of domestic diva in the States, who had been sent to prison for insider trading. And I lived opposite her jail for the entire duration of her sentence, trying to understand why Americans love Martha Stewart so much. And then I think it was 2005, we basically developed a sort of style of filmmaking which grew out of the fact that we wanted to do all the different roles on the films ourselves, me and Joel, my partner. And so it was a sort of quite rough and ready style of filmmaking, but one that we really enjoyed and suited us. And we were able, as we developed, to get access to sort of higher profile people and ideas. And in 2005, we made a film which wasn't commissioned at first. We just went out and made it on our own. We thought it was a good idea. There was this guy called David Cameron, and people were saying that he might become leader of the Conservative Party. He'd done, I think, one speech at a Conservative Party conference that people had really admired because he'd done it without any notes. And he got a standing ovation for doing a speech without notes, and people were falling in love with him. And we thought, well, before any of the kind of major news networks start covering him, if we started filming now, because we were very agile, we could just pick up a camera and go and do things. If we start filming him now for 2 or 3 weeks before the Conservative Party leadership election, maybe we could get access to him. So we did. We filmed him for 4 weeks, and he didn't have any security around him, so we could just, I could approach him wherever he was and just ask him silly questions, really. And we had a mole inside Conservative, the Conservative Party central office, so we could get his itinerary wherever he was going, and we would just pop up and ask him questions. So I'll show you just a minute's worth of a clip from that, so you get the idea of what I'm talking about. The picture quality is not great on this, I'm afraid. It's not very high resolution, but we will go with it.
But it's a very new experience doing that podium thing. It's quite
Incredibly exhausting on a minute.
You're quite thirsty.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Dave tried hard to associate himself with winners, choosing to visit Manchester United and taking a trip round the Oval, where to my delight, he revealed a genuine enthusiasm for cricket.
Are you a batsman or a bowler, David?
A bit of an all-rounder, actually, but not very good at either. I played for my village for a while.
Did you ever play for Eton?
No, I was in the 4th 11. Right. That is not a great distinction, I have to say.
It's not bad.
Well, it's better than... But no, it's good. The trouble with cricket is it takes all day. I mean, I love it. It's wonderful to watch, but if it's worse than golf, it is. Well, it's much more fun than golf.
Dave was obviously an enthusiastic cricketer, but enthusiasm wasn't everything, and I wasn't sure that I could vote for a man who played for the 4th 11. Nonetheless, Dave was being surprisingly friendly to me and to everyone else. To discover what Dave's secret might be,
So then we went on to discover what Dave's secret was. We did a lot of those sorts of documentaries, which were very down and dirty. We did all the roles, and they had a little bit of success. And what we discovered, this is me and my partner Joel, was that because we tended to work with other production companies and kind of we'd come up with our ideas, offer our services to those production companies, and then essentially make the programs ourselves in the program's entirety. We realized that it might be smarter for us to set up our own company and to work with other people who are making documentaries, try and monetize what we were doing a little bit more shrewdly. And so we set up 11 in 2006, shortly after that Cameron documentary. And so our idea was to work with other documentary makers, but also to try and do what we had always aspired to do, which was to start making scripted programs, to make dramas and comedies. And we weren't exactly sure about how to go about that at first, but we felt that if we pushed on enough doors and came up with some good ideas, that we might be able to make that happen. And there was a moment in 2008 where we were making quite a lot of documentaries, and Channel 4 were offering a pot of money for a series focusing on disabled people. And we pitched for that idea, but we said that we would take the budget for the documentary, but that we would make a 6-part drama series instead. And which was quite a sort of bold thing to say, because the budgets for the documentaries were £100,000 an hour. And £100,000 for an hour of drama is very, very cheap indeed, almost to the extent of being illegal, because it's almost impossible to pay people at the correct rates at that level if you're trying to make a professional drama. But we said that we would try and do that to Channel 4, and they bought into that idea. We attached a up-and-coming writer who we thought was really good, and has turned out to be very, very good. He wrote the Harry Potter play that many of you may have seen. He's the writer of the TV version of his Dark Materials. He's called Jack Thorne. He's won 7 or 8 BAFTAs now. So we were very lucky to choose him. He wrote an amazing set of scripts for us, and we ended up making a 6-part drama series called Cast-Offs for Channel 4 in 2009 that did very well for us reputationally. And it enabled us to develop many more scripted ideas. And at that point, there were just 3 of us in the company, and we would basically just throw around ideas, trying to work out what might be exciting for the commissioners to broadcast or to commission from us. One thing that we focused on initially was true stories done as dramas, because we'd come from a documentary background. So we had that as a sort of USP. And we came across a story, this is now in 2013, we came across a story that we thought was potentially quite exciting as a drama. And it turned out to be our most successful show up until that point. It was broadcast on Sky, and it was their highest rated, it was the highest rated original drama that they'd ever done at that point. And it was based on the true story of a poltergeist incident that had happened in the late 70s in Enfield in North London. And what was really quite fascinating about it was that all of the people that were involved in the incident, there was a family, a single mum and 4 kids, and then probably 20 or so people that had come into the house over the course of 2 years, where things were moving around and odd things were happening, and the girl was speaking in a sort of very weird old man's voice on various occasions, and giving weird insights into what had happened in the house sort of 30 or 40 years ago, where the previous occupant of the house had died, how they died. It's very, very spooky stuff. What was fascinating about it was that everyone that was involved with that incident didn't change their story over the course of the subsequent 30 or so years. Everyone stuck to their story, and still, you know, even till today, all the people that are still alive still say that what happened in that house happened. So we thought this was really quite an interesting case, and particularly interesting to do as drama, because you could obviously dramatize elements of it that they said that they had seen. So there was a challenge that Sky put to us. They really loved this idea, but they said, we will greenlight this, but you've got to get an actor that is well known to our audience. So we then came up with a list. We worked with the casting director, and then there was a brilliant actor called Timothy Spall, who older members of this audience will know from things like Auf Wiedersehen Pet. Younger members of the audience will know from Harry Potter. And Tim met with us, really loved the idea, was very sort of connected with the idea of the supernatural and the idea of depicting something in a kind of respectful way about a poltergeist. And so he joined the team. And then we had that greenlit, and we made it into a show that was nominated for a couple of BAFTAs in 2014. It was called The Enfield Haunting, and I will play a quick clip from it now. Here we go.
This is you, I'll kill you. It's inside the room. What is wrong with the both of you? Have we all had enough of the day already? Same bed. It's bad enough wearing your sails there, and now they're here.
And that is Tim Spall, who turns out to be the investigator who comes to investigate what's happening in the house.
Watch me, watch!
Oh, dear. Brave God. Oh, that was a bit of a nasty shock, wasn't it, eh?
It hurts.
Well, let's have a look, shall we?
Am I bleeding?
Oh, very scary.
Dreams.
Hold on a second. Is that still going? Give me a second.
Did you dream about her?
No.
There we go. So moving on from that, we then made a couple of other shows for Channel 4 and the BBC, and then I'll talk a little bit about sex education, which we pitched as an idea in 2014, 2015, and we pitched it to Channel 4, and we'd come up with an idea which we thought was interesting and sort of reflective in a way of a lot of the stuff that we tried to develop at 11, which is to say something a little bit about the world that provokes you or challenges your perception of the way that the world works. And we had this idea of taking a high school setting, but subverting the cliches that you might usually see in movies or TV shows about high school. So that each of the characters had a little more depth and subverted your expectation a little bit more of how they would behave. We liked that idea and thought it was quite exciting. And then we thought there was also a sort of creative way into that idea, which was to look back at some of those amazing John Hughes movies from the 1980s and to bring a sort of quite an aspirational sensibility to the idea, so that the school felt like the kind of place that you'd want to belong to, rather than the sort of place where, I think a lot of people have a memory of school as somewhere there where they wouldn't necessarily want to spend all of their lives and want to get away from. And we wanted to create a world which people would sort of look at and think, wow, I'd actually quite like to be there myself. So we pitched this as an idea with an emerging writer called Laurie Nunn, and we pitched it to Channel 4, who commissioned a script, just to give you a sort of sense of, how long the process of getting a drama can often be. So we pitched that in 2014 for Channel 4, as I say. Laurie then wrote a script, which took about 6 months. We then gave notes, Channel 4 gave notes. That notes process took about 6 months. Laurie did another couple of drafts. We thought it was in quite good shape, as did the commissioner. Unfortunately, then the commissioner left Channel 4. And so we thought, oh no. So we then took it to some of the other commissioners at Channel 4, who all said that they didn't like it. And which obviously is quite amusing now. So we then took it to the BBC, I took it to the BBC 2 or 3 times to different commissioners, and they turned it down for various reasons. Which is not necessarily to be disparaging about any of these commissioners. As a commissioner, you have your quite set sort of parameters that you're looking to commission into, and it's not always clear what's going to work and what isn't. But anyway, I probably over the course of the next year and a half took the idea to 20 to 25 broadcasters around the world, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, in the US. And it was turned down by everyone except for MTV, who offered up about the same amount of money per episode as we made cast-offs for. It was about $150,000 an episode, and we just obviously couldn't make it for that amount. And Netflix turned it down as well. And then a new commissioner arrived at Netflix, who I got on with very well, and we had a good relationship with. And although it's not particularly good form to take an idea back in to a broadcaster, particularly Netflix, twice, I thought that she would respond to it well. So sent her the script. She really, really liked it, and they moved very, very quickly to greenlight it. And that was in early 2018, I think 2017, 2018. So the process of setting it up took probably 4 years, and that's almost quite a quick process on the quick side. I don't know if anyone has seen the show, but I'll just play a little clip from season 1, episode 2, from that balmy summer from a couple of years ago. Here we go.
My gosh, bet you they have loads of toilets. It's a bit quiet, isn't it? Doesn't start till 8:30. Oh, it's only 8:15.
On time is late.
What does that even mean? Late is late, early is early, and we are very early. What are you doing?
Ringing the buzzer.
No, you're not. We're going to wait until other people get here.
Eric, that's being very silly.
Hey, Chris, I just told you not to ring that doorbell. I don't know what's what.
You look like you pooed yourself.
You will die!
Eric.
Why did you wear my trousers? What is wrong with you? You'll die by fire in the force because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this behavior, man. Hey, mate. You look fierce.
You look like a what's-it. Nice hat.
Hey, I think we're gonna have to go home because he's ruined his trousers. Looks like he's done a poo.
It's fine. We're going to the party. Yeah? It's a bit early, isn't it?
We're here for business.
Okay. How come she can ring it?
Well, she's not you, is she?
Here goes.
So that was season 1. We're now filming season 3, and as you can imagine, I think we are how many weeks in? We're about 20 weeks into our shoot. We've got 5 more to go. It's been an incredible sort of challenge to get a production up and running in these times where, particularly with lots of scenes which involve people coming quite close together, as you can imagine. And so we've got a COVID laboratory on our campus with a COVID team and quite a big COVID budget. Everyone gets tested, all the crew and the cast and the people involved with the show get tested 2 or 3 times a week. And that enables us to keep going. We've been incredibly lucky so far. We've had only a couple of days in that 20 weeks where we've had to stand down the crew. But otherwise we've been able to film all the way through. And yeah, and that season 3 will go out later this year. I'll just mention as well that just from the point of view, in case anyone's interested about the sort of growth of a company or setting up a company and the development of it, in this industry, it's very, if you're trying to grow a TV production company and then possibly to sell it, the sort of volatility of the industry is such that if you do get an opportunity to find a buyer and to do a deal, it's definitely worth sort of taking that with both hands. And we found that there are probably in our kind of life cycle as a company been 2 or 3 opportunities to find a buyer and to sell a bit of the business, and often things can go wrong to prevent the process going ahead. And we've had 2 occasions where that's the process of trying to sell a bit of the company has started, and then we had to pull back on it. We've been really lucky with Sex Education that actually things have moved in the right direction, and we did a deal which in itself felt like it was going to fall over, because we came to terms with Sony in just before March last year. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but in March last year, something quite significant happened that was negative. So when COVID emerged, I thought that the deal was almost certainly going to fall over, or at least be significantly delayed. But Sony were really enthusiastic to buy the company, and they held good on the main deal. So yeah, we sold 60% of the company to Sony last August, and it's been a really exciting time in that sort of new phase of the company. I'm just very aware it's now 35 past, and so Caroline, shall I hand back to you?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jamie. Thank you. No, that was an absolutely fascinating journey through your career, Jamie. So thanks for that. We've got some questions that have been sent in prior to the event, which I'm going to direct to you, and then hopefully some questions will come through on the chat as well. So I'm going to start with this question. How does a producer choose the directors for the series? Do people put themselves forward for consideration, or do they just pick directors who they are already familiar with?
That's a good question. It's a little bit of both, and there is quite a as a producer, there's quite a pull towards picking directors, or in fact any head of department that might be quite experienced, because producing a show is a bit like commissioning a show, which is every time that you try and do something, put something on, it's quite a big risk, and you want to try and de-risk it by your inclination on the whole is to try and de-risk it by bringing in people that are as experienced as possible. So on the one hand, there's a sort of, as I said, an inclination to choose people that you already know or who are very experienced, and to try and meet those people and try and bring them onto the show. On the other hand, it's been something that we as a company have always been very engaged with and keen on, which is to find people who are very inexperienced but very talented, and see what happens if you give them a platform to do good work. And so we're always on the lookout for newer directors too, and particularly on the subject of directors, my feeling is that you can often tell whether a director, someone who says that they're a director, really wants to direct or not by whether they've sort of got on with it themselves a little bit before you're speaking to them. And you can see almost all successful directors have sort of, made stuff in their bedroom, or they've borrowed or stolen equipment in order to just make a short film. Although nothing basically will stop them from getting a camera, telling people to go in front of it, and then shooting them doing that. And the results may not be pretty at first, as evidenced by what I showed you earlier in this talk, but but it's sort of that's what you're looking for. So the answer is it's a bit of a combination of both. You're looking for the inexperienced gold that you can support and nurture and help through the early part of their career, and then it's also good to find those brilliant, more experienced people. Sex Education is quite a good example of that. For each of the 3 seasons, we've had a very experienced comedy drama director called Ben Taylor, who came off a show called Catastrophe, where he directed every episode of all of the series, the first 3 series. So he was very, very experienced and very envisioned about how he wanted to shoot the show. He always directs the first half of each show, of each series, and then for the remaining 4 episodes, we always look for less experienced directors who might have something really exciting to bring to it. And I'll just mention one of those. The second block director from season 1 was someone called Kate Herron, who had only done a couple of shorts, and she'd done a 20-minute short comedy for Sky. So she, had barely done anything. She did the second block of Sex Education Series 1, and she immediately off the back of that went on to direct the Marvel TV series with Tom Hiddleston called Loki. And they're just wrapping on that in LA. So it sort of goes to show you that potentially if you do, even if you're very, very inexperienced like she was, if you come onto a show and do well, you can suddenly find yourself catapulted into the stratosphere.
Thank you. Just back to you, a question here from Mr. Pullen, and actually an added question for me. Why did you choose directing over acting? Is the first one. And me, I see that you have a little bit of a penchant for horror films in some of the footage that you put up there. Was that a genre that you particularly enjoyed?
Well, I'll answer that one first. No, it's not that. It's more sort of, well, I do love the horror genre, but there is a sort of noble tradition of people making horror on a low budget. That's the first thing. So it's something that you can do, and you can use camera effects, and I wouldn't call them tricks necessarily, but sort of camera techniques to produce quite sort of high level effects in the horror genre. So that clip that I showed you in Covered Passage is by no means a masterpiece, but if you analyze the sort of the different shots that we did there, you've got a few single shots, which are static shots of Tom walking past the camera, and then you've got a dolly shot where he's running down the corridor. Then you've got a moving shot where you're panning from him looking down the corridor where there's nothing to looking behind him, then coming back and finding me standing in front of him. And so you're able to flex your muscles a little bit there, and create something that has quite a disproportionate effect to the amount of effort that you're putting into it. It's also true that the horror genre in general on TV is quite low rent. And so with the Enfield Haunting, part of our sales pitch for that was that we were going to, if you like, raise the rent and do something that was of a sort of cinematic quality that you wouldn't necessarily expect of horror. And Sky bought into that idea. So that was partly what connected that. But having done those, actually the sort of the genre of true stories told as scripted horror, I think is quite interesting because it raises really quite fun questions for the audience about whether something has happened or not, and whether it's real. And so the screenings of the Enfield Haunting that I went to, I was always interested that people quite quickly sort of get out their phone and sort of look up on Wikipedia whether the things that we're saying happened actually did happen. And so, yeah.
Thank you. And why did you choose directing over acting was the other question.
For a while, I continued acting a little bit after I'd started directing, and then latterly when I'd started producing. But the truth was, both Joel, who as I say I work with, and myself like doing all of those things. We like acting and producing and directing and editing and shooting it and coming up with the idea, and just it's very sort of egotistical. But at a certain point, you realize that unless you're going to turn out to be someone who is able to be in everything that they're in as an actor or producer or director, it's a bit self-defeating to try and do all of those roles at the same time. Certainly I found that, and I realized that I wanted to try and focus down on the things that I like doing most. Initially that was directing and producing, and then for me I realized that, because even as a director, usually you're coming onto a process quite late. A director will tend to come on, so like Kate Herron, who I mentioned on season 1 of Sex Education, she's coming onto the show at the point where pretty much all the scripts are written, many of the people are already in place, the idea is pretty much defined. She'll come on and she'll put her mark onto it, but ultimately she's coming on quite late. I like the idea of sort of being, I've always liked the idea of being in at the sort of idea stage, and then actually shaping the idea and seeing what comes of it when you poke it in different ways, and discussing it with people, challenging each other about what's good about it, what doesn't work, what does. And then I like being there all the way till the end, and having that sort of experience of knowing all the details, knowing where the dead bodies are, and facing all the sort of challenges from the beginning to the end. It's quite a it's quite a cathartic process when you get to the end, and it's very satisfying, basically going all the way through, which is only really possible if you're a director coming on right at the beginning, which is quite unusual, or if you're the producer. So eventually I decided that I wanted to focus mostly on producing.
A question here from Ralph. What was the motivation to the timeless and placeless nature of Sex Education?
Oh, good question. Well, it came out of that thing that I mentioned earlier about John Hughes. I don't know if you've seen any John Hughes movies, but I'd really recommend them from the 1980s. Really sort of funny and kind of, revelatory about life, quite light, life affirming. And the other thing was about John Hughes, you're sort of, it doesn't take itself too seriously. And you can laugh out loud at John Hughes movies. It's very open-hearted. And we like that. And so when we got into the conversation about bringing some of John Hughes into our series, we talked about the look of it being more towards the sort of American high school look than towards UK secondary school look. And we did that for a couple of reasons, but mostly it was just about the feeling that we wanted to create a show that was aspirational. By that I mean a lot of UK high school comedies in film and TV, not that this is a negative thing, but they sort of revel in their characters not getting what they want, and facing an obstacle and tripping over it and then breaking their leg. US dramas and comedies on the whole have a different tone to them, which is the characters face obstacles continuously, but you sort of get the feeling that they're going to overcome in the end. And that's a question both of the way the scripts are written. It's a question of the way that you light the show. It's a question, and then it also comes down to costumes and locations and the design of the show. And we wanted to present a world which was uplifting and sunny. And part of that, to answer your question, was about going back to a time in the past, which was a little unspecified, but the thing for me was that it was pre-2001. Because I had a strong feeling that after 2001, specifically after 9/11, comedy became a little different. And you see around 2001, there are shows like The Office that start to emerge, where you can find them funny as an audience, but you tend not to laugh out loud. They're very self-aware, and they're also quite caustic, and they don't like poking fun at themselves. And we wanted to do something a little different, which was to find a way of, almost the opposite of that. And I felt that by going back before 2001, somewhere probably towards the 90s and 80s, that you get a different feeling, you achieve a different feeling. But it's quite a sort of, it really shouldn't work. And I think there are some UK critics, particularly UK, because outside the UK no one really cares about it, but that would say it doesn't work in that sense because it doesn't look like an English or a British high school. That wasn't really the point that we were trying to get to. We were trying to just create a sort of environment that was a little timeless and a bit placeless as well.
Thank you. I have a challenging question here from Ned. Did you ever have to hold down multiple jobs to subsidise an income? Because your career path, the way you described it, it was very natural and it seemed to flow, but I'm sure there were some highs and lows in there. So any points where you had to hold down multiple jobs?
I'm really glad that you asked that, because yes, that is definitely true. And it's also true that I'll just go back a little bit to when I'm at film school in 2000. So film school was actually quite expensive, and I would finish film school each night, and I joined a tutoring agency when I left university, and the first job that I was offered was with an American family based in Knightsbridge who had a young son called Charlie, who at that point was 8, and they said, look, this is quite a big, we're going to ask for quite a big commitment here. We want you to come every night after you finish film school, and we want you to teach Charlie or help with his homework, basically for 2 to 3 hours every night, indefinitely. And so I decided to take the job, and I did do that job for 5 years. I eventually moved into they had another house opposite the one that they had, and I moved into their other house. I'd very much recommend that, by the way, if anyone's. So that was I did that job for a long time, to subsidise film school, and then in the early sort of years of documentary making, which is not a particularly lucrative profession. And then when we were setting up the company, it was always true that we had to find other income in order to survive as a company. The way that we did that was to start directing adverts, which we started before we set up the company in 2006, but really up until 2015, which was when we did a smaller deal with Channel 4 to give us a bit of an overhead. We were directing adverts principally to stay afloat as a company. So the answer to that is very much yes. That was, I think, unless you get some sort of investment from a much bigger company, as a small independent drama or factual TV company, you need some other source of income, unless you're very, very lucky.
Thank you for your candour. I'm sure that prepared you for homeschooling during COVID quite well as well. Question from Henry. What would you look for in employing a young person in your company right now?
That's different things, because it depends which role. So as a company, we're made up of a number of different departments. One is the script department, which is the biggest department. So we have story producers, story executives, we have a head of development, and so that's quite a big sort of, development is quite a big area that we work in, almost the most important thing. Developing ideas. Once we've got an idea matched up with a writer, developing it with the writer, that process can go on, as I've said before, for years. And so it's a sort of engine room of the company. So from that point of view, if you're looking to come in a creative role like script, then we're always looking for people. In fact, we've got a scheme called Duly Noted, which we've just set up for people that are less experienced coming into the industry, particularly people of colour coming into the industry, to try and equip them for what is quite daunting, because it's difficult to know how to enter the industry. But in terms of script, we look for people that are very good at analysing scripts, can tell a good script from a bad script, can do good notes on the script, can do good research, and have a good, can be good diplomats with writers, because diplomacy is quite a big element of the job. And then we occasionally have work experience for people that are very fresh to the industry, but it's so competitive that the answer to that question is a bit intangible, but you have to be able to demonstrate why you're going to be totally committed to the job and to the company and to the industry. That they're sort of, I hope this doesn't sound sort of depressing, but more inspiring, but they're because it's so competitive, there's no room to come into the industry unless you're absolutely committed and can demonstrate that enthusiasm, and to some extent to demonstrate that commitment of being a sort of self-starter before you've even applied to the companies. Does that make any sense? I know it's a bit vague.
No, that's makes a lot of sense. And following on from that, have you got any tips for getting a script noticed by a production company?
Yes, I've got the key thing that you have to do to get your script noticed by any production company is for it to be, I know this will sound simplistic and trite, but for it to be really, really good. And the reason for that is that most scripts are not very good. The great majority of scripts are not very good, probably 95%. Probably about 4% are technically proficient but aren't inspired. And then there's probably 1%, maybe less than 1%, which are both technically excellent and have a really strong concept at the core of it, and the technique delivers on that initial promise. So I would say work really hard to find an idea that you totally believe in, and then start writing it. And when you've written the 7th draft, really ask yourself whether it's good enough to go out into the world, whether that's the one that you feel proudest of. And if there's any hesitation about that, you should move on to your next idea and put that one in your bottom drawer. And when you got to the 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th, then and the reason I'm saying this is it is so brutal as a writer coming into the industry, and you'll be coming onto a production where your idea ultimately gets commissioned, and you're actually producing it. You're going to be asked to do every script dozens and dozens of times, and to redraft and to redraft. Many of the notes you won't like, you'll have to fight against and disagree with, and you might not like the people that you're working with. You might love a lot of them, but you'll face many challenges. And so the key has to be that you love the initial idea and that you feel it's the best possible idea, and that you feel confident enough that it's that people will be making a mistake if they don't commission it. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good question here. Have you ever worked on a project, realized it's a disaster, but you can't change it for whatever reason? And in this situation, what would you advise doing?
I can't tell if that sort of behind that question is a personal story from the questioner. But if there is, then please write in and say, maybe give a bit more detail. But yes, certainly there have been occasions when we have gone forward on a project and then thought this just isn't working. But I would say that we have never got to that point in a show that has been greenlit, because the process is so painful that if you get any sense at an earlier point that it's not working out, then you tend to be able to ditch it at an earlier point than it actually going into production, if that makes sense. We've had shows which have been greenlit and then cancelled, and that is one of the most that is a horrible experience. I feel like I'm painting a picture of an industry which is brutal and not worth coming into, but the sort of counterbalance to that is that the sheer joy and magic of seeing an idea that you might be involved with come to fruition and then on a screen I've been in the industry, I suppose, for 20 years now, and you never lose the sense of just wonderment that, you know, that of something appearing on a screen that has taken that amount of sort of wrangling and molding, and also that maybe other people will enjoy it. It's an incredible career. I'd really recommend it.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm going to have to cherry pick some questions now. I'm just conscious of time. A question here from Arthur. How do you think the newer subscription-based services such as Netflix and Prime Video have changed the industry or will change the industry?
Hi, Arthur. They have changed the industry sort of beyond recognition. One of the major reasons for that is that the streaming services that you're referring to, like Netflix and Apple and Amazon, have a slightly different way of commissioning, which is they tend to want you to arrive when you're pitching them something, to hand over a script rather than pitching them an idea. They don't always take that approach, but they usually do. So you have to have at least one script prepared. You've had to have put in the energy, found the writer, paid the writer, invested in the idea first, and then you hand over the script. That enables those broadcasters to make decisions at a much more advanced stage in the creative process than the other broadcasters can, which means that they can move much more quickly, and they can see much more clearly whether an idea is at a better formed stage, whether it's actually going to work or not. It's a little similar to the sort of pilot season approach in the States, where broadcasters will only move forward with an idea when they've actually shot the first episode and then they've decided that it works. So it's a different version of that, where they demand the script first up, and that is quite significant. It means they've got, in the UK particularly, they've got quite a big market advantage on the linear broadcasters who are prepared to go through a much more elaborate and longer and agonizing script development process from the idea upwards. The other thing that has really significantly changed in the industry as a result of those streaming services is just from a conceptual point of view. If you're a writer, for example, 10 years ago and looking around in the UK at the broadcasters that you could pitch to, they're all quite defined. And BBC One, for example, would have been defined as focusing on the age group from 60 upwards. Channel 4 would have been defined as trying to target an audience between 16 and 24 and certain kinds of ideas. Equally, Sky and all the other broadcasters would have had a similar sort of remit. What the streaming services have done, which is radical and subversive, is to say, we don't really care what the idea is, as long as it is very, very good, and we can direct it at some part of our service. They're agnostic about demographics, agnostic about age groups. They can just focus on the good idea. Once they've got the good idea produced, then they can make it work on the service wherever it fits best. And that's really radical, because it means that you can pitch ideas which are totally off the wall, and if you or just incredibly expensive or left field or ambitious in a way that you can't to the other broadcasters. So if you look at some of the shows that have been on Netflix in the last 5 or 6 years, you can see things like The OA or Russian Doll, even Sex Education, which just wouldn't have been commissioned by linear broadcasters because the concepts themselves are a little much in some ways. The consequence of that, and I know we're running out of time, but just quickly, the consequence of that is that all of the other broadcasters have now said, we want to look at ideas which are really original, which are different from everything else that we do. And so there's quite a big influx of really original thinking in the industry, which is only a good thing.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to ask one final question. I'm actually going to change this question slightly. What advice would you give to someone trying to get into the industry today? If they were at Radley and they wanted to get into the industry, what advice would you give to them?
I would say yes. Again, it depends on what the role is. So just to be general, I would say that think really deeply about what it is about the idea of TV or film that attracts you. What is it? Is it the idea of producing something? Maybe it's you love design and you want to be a set designer or a costume designer. Maybe it's that you want to be a cameraman and you love the technical aspect of it. The one thing I would say is the huge advantage that if you're a Radleyan listening that you have over many, many other people coming into the industry is you literally have a sandpit available to you. And I can actually see Mr. Halsey there, and I know Mr. Halsey is still running the video unit and he told me some of the cameras that he's got available in the video unit. Your ability to try out, experiment, to make mistakes, work out what aspect of that creative process interests you is I have to say, quite amazing. And I would really encourage you to play around and experiment. And by doing that, you'll see which element of the industry appeals to you. And once you've done that, then it becomes a separate question. Maybe you would go to film school. Maybe you would, maybe you'd, like me, do English literature at university. Maybe you would, maybe you'd go off and you'd do a politics degree, and then you'd go and work for Unilever, but on the side, you'd start making short films, and then you'd realize that that's what you actually wanted to do. There's no one answer to that, but it's, I would encourage you to try and experiment while you're at school. It's a huge opportunity.
Thank you, Jamie. That was absolutely brilliant. A great insight into a career in TV production. And thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us. We're incredibly grateful.
Total pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Now, before we go, I'm going to tell you about the exciting career talks that we've got lined up for you next week. We've got, following on from Jamie's talk, on Monday, we'll look at the industry from a different angle. So we have Henry Hereford, actor, best known for his roles in Crossbones, alongside John Malkovich and Claire Foy, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and True Blood. So he's going to talk to you about how important it is to extend your skill sets beyond acting to become a great actor. On Wednesday, Doug Carr, entrepreneur and CEO of handbag company Melly Mello, will talk to you about the highs and lows of his career and what qualities he thinks you need to make a success of your own business. And on Friday, we have Hannah Bauer, Global Leadership Development Lead at Vodafone, a graduate recruitment expert, and she's going to talk to you about the value of pursuing multiple careers in your lifetime. So, without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at a talk in the future. Thank you and goodbye. And thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.